Hey guys, this is Steve the Scout, and I am the CEO of PigskinNut Media, and I am joined today by Austin Smith, who is our lead scout at PigskinNut, focusing on the NFL draft. And a little bit about what we're going to cover today is we're going to be going over the top 100 players in the NFL draft. There's a lot of guys every single year who make big boards, but how many of them really do the job to really go through all the tape, to actually write the scouting reports and really understand and be able to evaluate what these players can bring to a team. Of course, this is brought to you by Pigskin Nut, and Pigskin Nut is built for the hardcore football fan who is sick and tired of getting shortchanged on their football content. We deliver a higher caliber of content with deeper analysis, better topics, written by football guys like Austin, not one-size-fits-all sports journalists. We analyze and study the game closely, challenging ourselves to write the best content so we can really say that PigskinNut.com is for those who are crazy about football. And look, we are a big site that's focused on analysis, and that's why we have a guy like Austin Smith to be our lead analyst on the NFL draft. A little bit about Austin. He's originally from Garland, Texas, outside of Dallas. Austin played football through college at the University of North Texas. Football was his passion. As Austin developed his career, he really got into journalism, specifically focusing on football, with his main passion in football becoming the NFL draft. It became his favorite sporting event at a young age. And what Austin did is he took his knowledge of both college and professional football, because remember, he also played college as well, and used this really as an opportunity, to get himself in the industry of evaluating players. Austin has still serves as a scout at Draft Tech and here at Pigskin Nut. So whether Austin is working as a scout, a coach, or an analyst, he's constantly working to get better in each field. And I've worked with Austin now for a little bit over a year, and I can tell you he knows his stuff. So, Austin, welcome, and we are excited to be going over your top 100. Let me ask you a big picture question, real quick. When we look at this top 100, what's one major thing that stands out? Where's the depth at?
Well, for starters, and I don't think this is anything new. I think we're going to see this, not just in this year's draft, but in drafts to follow. Wide receivers are deep. I mean, and that's a byproduct of the college game. Games spreading out. They're doing more. Actually, I would say college and NFL passing games are starting to mimic each other in that they don't need the Julio Jones anymore to be a successful passing game. They don't need that Larry Fitzgerald, that guy that just offers everything, whether it's a route runner, whether it's a deep threat, whether it's a guy who can make a big play after the catch, whether it's guys that can turn a big play out of an intermediate route, out of a possession route, out of a short route, a deep route, guys that can go up and win 50-50 balls, guys that can separate from coverage. You don't need a guy that does that anymore. And teams have kind of realized that once you spread out and you put these defensive backs in a tough situation, it's kind of a pick your flavor type of thing. Because of that, we're seeing so many wide receivers that have the ability to not only make it at the NFL level, but have a fair amount of success, as a top three wide receiver. So I think that's something that we will see each and every year moving forward, based on the way the NFL passing games are starting to mimic the college ones. What I will say is this: last year was a deep group of wide receivers as well, but we didn't see our top receiver come off the board until the late 20s. This year, we've got a group of guys that should all be candidates to go in the top 10. We could see as many as 6 or 7 go in the first round. Heck, guys, we could see as many as 10 to 12 go in the first 2 rounds. I mean, this is really a deep group. There's still going to be guys there available on day 3 that can be top 3 wide receivers on a roster just based on the way a current roster is built. You can find a guy on day 3 that can truly help your team. And so that's one thing that I took away from this group is, you know what? Yes, we've got our typical deep group of receivers, but this year it's a little bit top heavy. This year, we're not going to be questioning, is DK Metcalf, is this guy going to be a true number 1 target? Is Marquise Brown healthy and big enough? Is A.J. Brown, does he have that, that elite athleticism to do? We questioned that about some of those guys last year. This year, we're not questioning CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. We're not questioning those guys. And we're even seeing, the same kind of guys, later in the first round that we think could have possibly even been the first receiver off the board last year. Guys like, Justin Jefferson at LSU, like T. Higgins at Clemson, even the Jalen Riegers, Denzel Mims of Baylor, guys like that might have been one of the top receivers drafted in last year's class. This year, they might be 5 or 6. So the top heavy group of receivers this year is something I think is really special. The other thing is this. There's been years in the past where I felt like picking in the top 10, you kind of got gypped because you know what? There was maybe a solid 3 or 4 guys that really were top 10 talents. And then after that, there were obviously you're going to have 10 players picked at that level. But, people were valuing them at the top 10 simply because they were the next best player on their board. This year, I think we've got a group of probably around 14 players that I really think could go in the top 10 and deserve to go in the top 10, not based on the other players and their draft grades, basically based on the draft grade that individual's got, and it's high enough to where if I'm picking with a top 10 pick, he may not be in the top 2 or 3 players on my board available, but the grade tells me that he's a value in the top 10. We haven't always seen that in past years. This year, I think if you're picking in the top 10, unless you just reach on a guy that you really fall in love with, I think no matter which way you go, you're going to get your bang for your buck.
Yeah, it's a deep class as far as that goes. It's certainly more top heavy, than it was last year. But when we at your big board, top 10, you have Chase Young number 1, you have Joe Burrow coming in at number 2, at number 3 you have Jeffrey Okudah, then you have Isaiah Simmons, Derrick Brown, Tua, Jedrick Wills, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, and then Andrew Thomas. Of these top 10, if I'm going to ask you who's a player in this top 10 that, man, it's just really hard to find a guy like that. A very, very rare find. A guy with a rare combination of skills that you're like, they just don't make guys like this every single year. Who's that player for you in the top 10?
The easy answer is Chase Young because he is my top player in this draft. And he is a defensive end that can affect the game in so many different ways, much like the guys that came before him, guys like Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa, who have both been, top 2, 3, 4 selections. The difference with Young is the fact that, man, the physical gifts are there. And although he's not the technician of Nick and Joey Bosa, you can tell that he emulated Nick Bosa while the two played together at Ohio State. You could tell that he saw the way he worked with his hand placement, his variety of pass rush moves, coordinating his feet and his hands together to make those moves as fluid as possible. You can see where Nick Bosa rubbed off on him, as well as the pure raw talent. So Chase Young's the easy answer, but I got to say this. If Tua Tagovailoa doesn't suffer 3 major injuries in a calendar year, 2 ankle injuries that require surgery so he can get back onto the field and help get that team's national championship hopes back online. And then obviously the very serious hip injury that, we're still wondering, just how he's going to recover from that and when he's going to recover from that, still not 100% certain on a timetable, of when he's going to be ready. Without those injuries, he's the best player in this draft. Better than Chase Young, I just said. Better than Joe Burrow, in my personal opinion, who is the second best player in this draft on my board. And that's not a knock on Burrow. It's not a knock on Young. That's just how gifted a passer Tua Tagovailoa is. And we are talking about the possibility of getting him not at 1, not at 2, at 3, at 4, at 5. I even saw somebody the other day that had him dropping all the way down to 9. Guys, we are talking about a special, talented quarterback with an injury question. That's for certain. But a guy who could instantly step into an offense and change that the path of that unit. He's a special player when he's healthy. Put the right talent around him, and he can do things, in my personal opinion, like a Russell Wilson, like a Deshaun Watson, like an Aaron Rodgers, like a Patrick Mahomes. That's the kind of passer he is. Maybe doesn't live up to the arm strength of a Patrick Mahomes. Maybe doesn't have the size of some of these guys. But overall, his ability as a passer is just so special. It's something that we have not seen in a while. And if you want to know how special it really is, we've heard knocks on Alabama forever about how, good quarterbacks don't come from Alabama because Nick Saban wants to pound the ball. He wants to run with all those Heisman Trophy candidate running backs that he's constantly got. They just pump them out year after year after year. Tua Tagovailoa stepped into that offense, and he forced Nick Saban to give the green light to change that offense, to basically build it around what he knew was a special passer. Guys, that's special. When you get a hard-headed coach like Nick Saban who's stuck in his ways, who has a proven path to success, and he rips it up and says, nope, build it around that guy, that's how you know it's special.
Yeah, he certainly is, and that is the concern there. We all know what he's capable of when he's healthy. I think when he's healthy, he's a top 3 pick. I think even comparing him to Andrew Luck, he's probably a better thrower of the football than Andrew Luck was coming out of school, and that's pretty sensational to be able to say that. So he is, he has all the tools you want. But the question is, it's a foreign injury, an injury people aren't used to. So we'll see what happens. So let's take a look at picks 11 through 20 here. 11 through 20, we have Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle from South Carolina, coming in at number 11. I'm going to start naming the schools and all that because that way make sure everyone's familiar with it. Tristan Wirfs, the offensive tackle from Iowa, coming in at number 13. We have Henry Ruggs, wide receiver from Alabama. 14, Justin Herbert, quarterback, Oregon. 15, Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle, Louisville. Kalavian Chason, outside linebacker, LSU. C.J. Henderson, quarterback, Florida. DeAndre Swift, running back, Georgia. Grant Delpit, safety, LSU. And then, of course, we got Justin Jefferson, wide receiver, LSU. So when we look at these guys here, because we got a couple of we got some LSU guys. We got 3 LSU guys in there. When you look at this list, 11 through 20, who do you see as a guy here that can come in and is most ready to make an impact for his team in year 1?
Kinlaw at South Carolina, once again, I go to the top of the list, but man, he's a guy that a lot of people are going to have him in their top 10 prospects. And I'm not big on NFL comparisons because a lot of times I could take a combination of four players and compare that prospect, parts of his game, to each one of them. But boy, Chris Jones over at Kansas City, when he was coming into the league out of Mississippi State, wasn't exactly sure. He wasn't the big, heavy defensive tackle, but, he was this big, broad-chested, long-armed player that wasn't a best fit as an edge player. Anything, though, inside the tackles, you could make a case for him to be successful at. That's what Kinlaw is, man. The long arms, big body, broad-shouldered, the power and the explosion off the snap just jump off the tape. This guy walks big players into the backfield. He's just he's special. He really is. And that's that just goes to show how top heavy this group is.
You compared him to Chris Jones, didn't you?
Oh, I mean, he's got a lot of similarities. The physical aspects, the length, the power, the athleticism and initial explosion off the snap, the height, size. I mean, everything. Yes, he very, very similar. Now, Chris Jones, I thought coming out of Mississippi State still had some figuring out to do. I still think his best football was ahead of him, where Kinlaw, we saw it last year at times. I remember spotlighting him when they were playing Alabama and saying, guys, and this is in my Draft Watch articles that I do week after week, highlighting prospects who have got big matchups. I highlighted South Carolina versus Alabama, and he was one of the South Carolina players that I was highlighting, and I said, guys, I think Alabama's going to blow South Carolina out of the water. However, these guys can help make it look respectable if they play up to the task. And Kinlaw made a handful of plays in that game where it's like, wow, this guy's one of the best football players on the field. And it just showed, man, he stepped up his game, knowing that the talent around him was not up to par to compete with that loaded Alabama offense. I mean, heck, what do we have? 4 players off that Alabama offense in my top 13 prospects. I mean, some of them that chose to come back next year. I mean, it's crazy to think how loaded that group was, but he knew that if his team was going to believe that they could compete, it started with him being able to make plays in order to infuse that energy into the other 10 players on his unit, and he did it. I mean, he came out and he made those guys believe, and South Carolina competed in that game for a good portion of it. So, he's just a guy that, man, whether you want to play him as a hybrid end, an inside shaded defensive end in a hybrid scheme, or a 5-tech in a 3-4 scheme, or a 3-tech in a 4-3, as an under tackle. If you want to mix your fronts, this guy can do it. This guy is scheme versatile. I don't care who drafts him. I don't care what position you're drafting him at, which isn't always the case. There's some guys out there that I say, well, if you're drafting him to be a 3-tech, he's a first-round prospect. If you're drafting him to play more of this role, though, maybe a 5-tech end or something like that, he's not quite as valuable in that role. No, Kinlaw is a top 10 to 12 prospect in this draft at a variety of positions and a variety of schemes. That's special.
Very, very, very good. And look, everyone, every team, every fan should realize this, that people always talk about, we need edge rushers. We need edge rushers. But, a good pass rush, if you look at the teams around the NFL, good pass rush that starts from the interior. And, a guy like that is going to make everyone's job easier. So we're going to move on to the next group of picks that we got here. We got picks 21 through 30. We have Jordan Love, QB from Utah State, AJ Epinesa, defensive end Iowa, Kenneth Murray, linebacker Oklahoma. Coming in at number 24, Xavier McKinney, safety Alabama, 25 is Josh Jones, offensive tackle, Houston. 26, we got T. Higgins, wide receiver, Clemson. 27, we got Trayvon Diggs, defensive back, Alabama. Patrick Queen, lay the wood, linebacker from LSU. And then 29, we got Cesar Ruiz, guard, center, interior lineman from Michigan. And then we have Terrell Lewis, outside linebacker, Alabama here. So, I look at the top of this list, and I see Jordan Love and AJ Epinesa, two guys that to me, obviously they play different positions, but they're opposites. Where I think AJ Epinesa has a very, very high floor, where Jordan Love has a lower floor but a much higher ceiling. Because I look at AJ Epinesa as a guy that'll get 8-9 sacks a year and cause a lot of pressures, but I don't know if I necessarily see a consistent all pro there, but I see a guy who could be one of the top 15% best defensive ends, which is still impressive here. But when you look at this list, 21 through 30, I know obviously how you have them ordered, but who's a guy here that really provides a lot of value and could come in and make a difference in year one?
Well, for starters, you're exactly right about Love and Epinesa. You're talking about one guy in Epinesa where you know what you're getting. You pretty much know what you're going to get. You put him as an inside shaded defensive end, like New Orleans tends to do with Cameron Jordan at times, like Calais Campbell has done at numerous times in his career. You put him in that kind of role, that's what he fits best. But you know what you're getting. Jordan Love, there's a wide possibility of what you could be getting. And you can go out and read about him. And Patrick Chiotti, another one of our analysts, he did his top 5 bust candidates in this group, and Love was one of them. Love, guys, Love could be everything from, a Jamarcus Russell, in that his feet never even hardly hit the ground, or a Paxton Lynch, where he doesn't even ever earn the trust to even get an opportunity to be a full-time starter, all the way. And guys, I know saying this name, people say, oh, you can't compare anybody to him. Patrick Mahomes. Guys, the arm talent is there. The athleticism is there. I'm not saying he's going to be Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes, do you know how many guys we thought could be this groomable before Patrick Mahomes actually lived up to it? We've seen this in plenty of players, just like we see it in Jordan Love. And Patrick Mahomes is the one that you can actually point to and say, see, it can happen. You can groom a raw talent. So, but the talent is there. So you're right. Completely opposites. If I'm going with a guy, though, that I'm a really big fan on, and, Kenneth Murray, guys, let me just say this. I was not the biggest fan of Kenneth Murray's tape when it comes to what I'm looking for in a first-round linebacker. I'm not saying Kenneth Murray's not a good player, because he is. Kenneth Murray, he goes out, he infuses energy into that Oklahoma defense, a defense that constantly got labeled as the weak link of that team, the reason that team was never going to get to a championship or even deserving of making that 14 playoff. He consistently turned that negative attention, that negative press into fuel and made that unit believe. What I will say is this. Yes, there are some things to his game that are a little bit lacking. I wish he had a little bit better instincts. He reacted a little quicker at the position. The physical ability is all there. This guy, the size, the athleticism is all there. However, when I hear scouts refer to interviews with a player and they say, man, that might be the best interview I've ever had in my time doing this, that's where you've got a guy who can change the direction of a unit. And that's what we're hearing about Kenneth Murray. Teams are interviewing him at the combine. One AFC scout says, guys, This is a guy that just delivered the best interview I've ever been a part of. Another coach says, I view him as a 10 to 15 year franchise cornerstone because of not just the player he is, but the person, the leader. You look at this guy, it's like, man, this guy's going to represent our franchise in a positive way in every manner consistent of what you want a franchise cornerstone to be. Guys, that's special. That's something that you go ahead.
I'm going to say, I think, cut you off. I think there's two teams that would make sense to me when you talk about this kind of player. And those two teams are the Raiders and the Patriots. Patriots, the Patriots, you go back in the days of, Teddy Bruschi, Mike Vrabel. They like to have these alpha cornerstone type players, or Rodney Harrison. I mean, I can keep going on. When you look at the Oakland Raiders, the way they were forming their organization last year with Mike Mack as the GM, they talked about cornerstone players and players that, he said this last year, and this is the reason why they drafted what's his name? Who's the guy I'm thinking of? The
Cleveland Farrell.
Cleveland Farrell. They drafted him over Cleveland Farrell over Josh Allen, and the reason why they did that is because of what they thought they were getting in the person. So
I wanted a culture setter.
Yeah, and from what you're saying, that's what this guy sounds like there. So we're gonna move on now. We're gonna go to the next group that we got here. We're going picks 30. We're going picks 31 through 40. Some running backs here. We have J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State, running back 31, 32. Laviska Shenault, wide receiver, Colorado at 32. Jonathan Taylor, running back, Wisconsin, 33. Lloyd Cushenberry, good Senior Bowl. Center, LSU, coming in at number 34. Jeff Gladney, a quarterback from TCU, coming in at 35, who I think could be a good value there. Jalen Reagor, wide receiver from TCU, and at 37, we have Zach Bond, outside linebacker from Wisconsin. 38, we have Kristen Fulton from LSU. 39, we have Austin Jackson from USC, and then at 40, we have Ross Blacklock there, defensive tackle, TCU. Every single year in the draft, I mean, usually when you're getting to picks 25 through 40, 30 through 40, you're gonna find a guy that should have been drafted or earlier. But when you just go through this list right here, which of these players gets you most excited to talk about in this list?
I have to be honest. It's the two players that have the potential to possibly not pan out, and that yes, there's a lot of risk in them. But that's Colorado's Laviska Shenault and USC's Austin Jackson. Now, let me say this: these two guys, Shenault was another one on Patrick Chiody's bust list. That could possibly, just not fit in an NFL offense. I'll say this: Shenault reminds me of a more polished yet smaller version of Cordarrelle Patterson. When it comes to his versatility and his ability to make plays with the ball in his hands, he's a physical guy. He's an outstanding athlete, terrific football player. I'm telling you right now, like I said earlier, there are some guys that are, scheme versatile and they could play a variety of different positions. With Laviska Shenault, I don't know if I feel that way. I don't know if I feel like you could just line him up as a traditional perimeter receiver and get good value out of him, out of maybe a late first or an early second round pick, which is where I've got him, slotted right now. you're going to have to create a role for him, similar to what we saw the Patriots do with Cordarrelle Patterson. Put him in the backfield some, put him in the slot some, use him in all kinds of jet sweep motions and reverse motions. Use him in screens. Find ways to consistently get him involved. The little drag routes, the little crossing routes, the pick and rub routes. Those are the things that Laviska Shenault is going to make his value. If you put him out there and you say, hey, I want you to be a traditional receiver, you're just not going to get the same value out of him. He's not that kind of player. He's not better than a variety of receivers I've got ranked lower than him in that area. But if you use him properly, I even throw like a Percy Harvins in there. Look at how the upside of Percy Harvins had in his career when he was used properly. You use him properly, he is an offensive weapon that can be outstanding. Guys, another player I like in that category, look at Alvin Kamara. You line him up and run him 25 times down the middle of the field, he is not a top 10 running back in this league. You put him in the role that he's been in at times when Mark Ingram was still there in New Orleans, though. He's one of the most dangerous football players in the game. That's what I'm talking about. Get Laviska Shenault in a role. The other guy I mentioned, Austin Jackson, in my February big board, he was down at the bottom of the top 100 list. He was down in the low or the high 80s, I think. However, he is going to be drafted at the age of 20. This guy's best football is still ahead of him, and the physical traits that he's got, the size, the easy moving athleticism he's got, are the types of things you yearn for in a left tackle. I tell people this, guys, he's not going to be an impact player for you year one. If you could imagine wanting a sophomore to come out in the draft, knowing that he's still got a lot of development left in his game, and you could be patient with him for a year, that's what the kind of the way you have to treat an Austin Jackson. This is a guy, yes, he would have absolutely benefited it to stay another year at USC. He didn't. For a team out there that's looking for a left tackle, a long-term fit at left tackle, but has a guy that can get by for a year, I think Austin Jackson would be a steal and could be one of the top players in this draft 5 years down the road with a team that's patient with him and develops him properly. That's the kind of upside he has. However, if you put him on the field at left tackle year one and tell him to go out and have success, there's a strong chance you're going to ruin him. There's a strong chance the league's going to chew him up, spit him out. His confidence is going to go south, and you will never get that confidence back up to what you need to be able to be a starting left tackle in this league. Upside is outstanding. The downside is scary for both of those players.
And I think in that scenario, the ideal thing that would be best for his career, go to a place where, number one, there's a good offensive line coach. Number two, maybe a left tackle who he's got a few years left, and a guy that can mentor him. In today's NFL, we're seeing left tackles play until a much later age. I mean, for God's sake, look at Andrew Whitworth. But I think if he can go to a place where he can be mentored, that would be most ideal there. So we're going to move on now. We're going to go through the next 10 picks. Coming in at number 41, you have Yetur Gross-Matos. Did I say that right?
Yetur Gross-Matos.
Yetur Gross-Matos. Defensive end, Penn State. 42, you have KJ Hamler, wide receiver, Penn State. 43, we have Ezra Cleveland, offensive tackle from Boise State. 44, we have Neville Gallimore, defensive tackle, Oklahoma. 45, we have Denzel Mims, wide receiver, Baylor. 46, we have Netane Muti. Did I say that right?
Netane Muti.
Netane Muti. Thank you. 47, Marlon Davidson, defensive tackle, defensive end, Auburn. Curtis Weaver, outside linebacker, Boise State. 49, we got Bryce Hall, Virginia, and then 50 we have AJ Terrell there. So, um, when I look at this, a couple guys that I've had a chance to look at here. Um, I really actually like Denzel Mims. I'd like to watch more tape on him, but he's a guy that I've been watching a little bit and starting to feel good about, but I want to watch a little more. Neville Gallimore, I had a chance to see him at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked really impressive at the Senior Bowl, and then Ezra Cleveland. You go back to the NFL Combine. One of the things about the Combine is you like to see how guys move. And I think for offensive linemen, it's a great chance to see how much of a natural mover are they. And Ezra Cleveland certainly was that. So, but for you, Austin, this is your big board here. Where does the value in this big board lie? And who's a guy here that between these picks, 40 to 49, that 41 to 50, a guy that really could be a big steal here?
Yeah, you hit the head on a few of them. Ezra Cleveland, a lot like Austin Jackson, who I just talked about. A little bit further in his development, maybe not quite as much upside as Jackson has, but somebody who would definitely fit well in a zone blocking scheme. Denzel Mims, I've kind of referred to him as a little bit of a B-plus version of DeAndre Hopkins. A guy with outstanding body control and torso flexibility, catches everything in his grasp, really does a good job with his routes because of that body control, that balance he plays with. The guy I want to hit on, and this is not going to be a sexy pick no matter who ends up getting him. They're going to say, oh, I don't know how I feel about him. What position does he play? Let me tell you something, guys. Marlon Davidson has a chance to be a steal in this draft. Is he a 300-pounder? Is he a 285-pounder? Guys, we're going to find out. That's all going to be sorted out once he's actually drafted onto a team. However, the one day that he got to participate at the Senior Bowl before he got nicked up, he was just a beast. This was a guy, it didn't matter what position they put him at. Put him on the interior, put him on the edge, it did not matter. He was an absolute beast. Marlon Davidson, everybody talked about the big Cat Bryants, the Nick Cozen, obviously Derrick Brown, who's a top 5, top 10 pick in this class. Marlon Davidson has an insane amount of power and explosion off the snap. And guys, he translates that initial explosion and acceleration into power almost as good as anybody in this class. He is a player, once again, very similar to Kinlaw, that can play a variety of positions in a variety of schemes. And whereas I think Kinlaw could even handle the nose position, I don't know if Davidson could handle that, but I do think Davidson could handle some snaps as an edge player. So we're talking about a guy who can be an under tackle, can be a 5 technique in an odd man front, can be a hybrid end that lines up inside shade, could be an edge player. I mean, there is not a team that should not have Marlon Davidson on their draft board. And I say that because there are teams that look at players and say, guys, doesn't fit our scheme, just take him off the board.
Austin, let me ask you this. Could this be something like a Geno Atkins all over again? A guy who maybe is a little bit of a tweener, who you're not sure what he's going to play, but ultimately he just has this raw ability. And Atkins got drafted, I think sometime in the second round. This guy, does this guy have that kind of upside?
He absolutely does. And you know what? If I'm comparing him to a player, and I mentioned this player earlier when I was talking about the role that Epinesa could play, Cam Jordan, who is a stud for the New Orleans Browns. I'm not saying that that Davidson's necessarily going to have that kind of impact ability, that kind of upside. But guys, the skill sets are very similar. The explosion and power, the ability to translate speed and explosion and acceleration into power is very, very similar. Marlon Davidson could be a guy that teams come away and they said, you know what, going into the draft, we didn't know what his natural position was, and then he gets on a team, they find a role for him, or better yet, they create a role, a versatile role for him where he can play different positions in the front, and all of a sudden they've got an invaluable piece to their defense. That is exactly what Marlon Davidson could be. Like you said, like he was, because you're right. A lot of people had questions about him coming out. In Cincinnati, he's just been an absolute stud for them. Same goes with Cam Jordan. Fell to the latter part of the first round because people wondered if he could be a true edge rusher. People wondered if he maybe needed to play more of as an inside shaded end. Guys, Marlon Davidson, mark my words, I think Marlon Davidson's going to be a guy that a lot of teams regret passing on 2-3 years down the line. Regret that they passed on him 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah. Another guy you have there right at the end of your have him right at 50 is cornerback AJ Terrell. And actually, I see that you have in here that you think this guy can have an early impact, in the NFL. Are we talking about a guy that could really be drafted, at the end of the second round, who has number one corner type ability?
Yeah, but we're talking about a guy. Yes, could he be drafted late in the second round? He could be drafted right near the end of the first round, to be perfectly honest with you. This is a guy I wish the confidence was consistent from him during his time at Clemson. Now, I'm not saying that this is a guy that went out there and doubted himself, but you could tell that there were times where receivers got the best of him, and it changed his frame of mind. But man, when this guy goes out there and plays like he knows he's one of the best players on the field, we see a guy that gets his hands on a lot of passes, breaks them up, gets turnovers. We see a guy who is not afraid of the man across from him. Hey, against LSU in that national championship, that early on they said, hey, we're going to take chances with Jamar Chase, the Biletnikoff winner, against him. We're going to take chances with Justin Jefferson, with some of these receivers we've got. Let's be honest, that LSU offense was special, and they did not shy away from Terrell, who was the better corner on that roster. They said, "Bud, we don't care who you are. We don't care if you're the best player on the defense. We're still going to try and get the ball to the guy we want to get the ball to." Early on, guys, LSU struggled a little early on in that national champion. Eventually, they got their grip. And yes, eventually, Chase made a few plays against Terrell. Eventually, the passing game made a few plays. But I'll say this much. When this guy is confident, this guy can be a number one type player. With corners, it really is about getting them in a scheme that really fits them. We've seen that with players like Josh Norman, who was a stud in Carolina, to change teams, go to a team that had a different style of coverage, and all of a sudden, he's nowhere near the same player. Guys, that man coverage, zone coverage, off coverage, press coverage, that there's so many different things that factor into how a cornerback is comfortable and confident in his role. If AJ Terrell finds the right coverage scheme and they line him up properly, he absolutely can be a number one corner on the team. Matter of fact, a lot of the reason I've got some of these other guys ranked ahead of him is because I think they're a little bit more versatile scheme-wise than AJ Terrell is. But I'll say this much. There's no doubt in my mind, Terrell could wind up in the right situation, and a team could get to training camp and they could be just, glowing about how, man, we just found a gem. We just found a guy who's going to be our lockdown corner.
Nice. Yeah, he has the length, and when you're playing on the outside, that is what it's all about in the NFL today. So we're going to go now to picks 51 through 60. 51, we have Antoine Winfield. You guys remember that His father also played safety in the NFL for Minnesota. So Antoine Winfield, safety number 51. Michael Pittman, number 52 from USC. Lakey Fotu, defensive tackle, Utah. Did I say that right?
Yep.
All right. We have Bradley Anai, defensive end from Utah. 55, Kyle Duggar, safety. 56, we have Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, running back, LSU. 57, we have James Lynch, defensive end and tackled from Baylor. Number 58, we have Noah, and help me out here, Austin. How do you say this gentleman's name?
Igbinoghene,
cornerback from Auburn. Number 59, we have Tyler
Biadasz. And
here's the thing: I've actually seen number 59 Tyler play. He's a guy that I had a chance to see last year. Could be a very good center in the NFL. Then at number 60, we have Justin Mabaluk.
Matabuke,
man.
Yes.
We
got some crazy names in this group.
Yeah, 50 through 60 is bad, but let me ask you this. When you look at here, 50 through 60, a guy like Bradley and we saw last year when Chase Winovich, went to New England. Here's another guy that is another really technical player with a lot of tenacity, but also doesn't really have the necessary length. Where does a guy like that fit into the NFL, considering that the NFL more than ever is about length at so many positions?
A team's going to have to take the risk on him that all the intangibles, the motor, the technique, and all that, that they really do continue to show up at the NFL level. But, I don't see that being a problem. That's why I've got him ranked as high as 54, is because I truly believe this is just a guy you can't bet against. This is a guy that when you put him one-on-one with a tackle across from him, and you tell him, bud, on a particular third down, we need you to beat that guy. We need you to win. You can't bet against Bradley and I. I mean, he is one of those players that infuses energy into the defense, and Chase Winovich was a very similar player. You talk about a guy that you just wouldn't bet against him. Do the physical traits, does the stature add up to what you're looking for? No, but the production is there. That this is a guy that, I just would not bet against. I would not bet against. And one of the guys that helped take over that Senior Bowl game in Mobile. I mean, he had a heck of a game. And, like I say, it's going to be up to the team that's drafting him. You're going to have to be comfortable with the shorter arms. You're going to have to be comfortable with the fact that he's not the biggest defensive end either. I mean, this guy's not 6'4", 6'5", and like I say, he doesn't have the arm length, but in the same sense, I find it hard to bet against this guy. His motor, his tenacity, his passion, I just find it hard to bet against the guy, and I'd probably be one of those ones that would, and I've got him in my most recent 2-round mock draft that I put out at the very beginning of April. I've got him in the second round, I believe, to the Minnesota Vikings as a possible guy that can make up for the loss of Everson Griffin. I do. I think this is a guy you bet on.
Yeah, he's his motor is unquestionable. You turn on the tape. When I watched him, this is you watch that Utah defense. You got another guy here, Lakey Fotu, but I think when you're looking at guys coming off the edge, Bradley and I, so you notice there. Another guy you have on this list, quite a polarizing prospect, maybe the most on this list, because he's on the national champion LSU Tigers, is Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. Where do you see this guy carving out a niche for himself in the NFL?
I really think it's going to be, for him, it should start as more of a complimentary back. And I'll tell you why. First of all, he's got the skill set to do whatever you need him to do. If you need him to be more of an in between the tackles guy, he can do that. If you need him to make plays in the passing game, even pass protect, I believe he's capable of doing those things. He's an energy guy. This is going to be a guy teams are not going to have a lot of fun tackling. He's built low to the ground. He's got an insane amount of lower body power and balance. You know, the ability to absorb contact and keep his balance is really, really good. I personally, you know, I went out on a limb and had Kansas City taking him with the last pick of the second round in my latest mock draft because it's funny. I don't think it would be smart for Kansas City to bring in any back with aspirations of being a feature type guy simply because Patrick Mahomes is the feature player in that offense. No difference than this last year, Joe Burrow was the feature player in the LSU offense. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is used to being the unsung hero. He's used to being the guy who doesn't get all the headlines, but still goes out there and puts in the same amount of work, if not even more, to be able to deliver when his number is called. I love the versatility. I love the passion, the drive he's got, the humble workman, blue collar type attitude. I will say this. People, see some people that have him ranked higher than what I've got at 56. They've got him possibly even being a candidate to be one of the first players off the board on day 2. I tapped the brakes on that simply because I watched a lot of his 2018 tape too. And we saw a guy that did not have the same kind of impact, that oftentimes did not even know what his role was, had a hard time finding ways to be involved. And yes, there were times where his number was dialed and he did not deliver. And sometimes it looked like, he was hesitant. He was, tentative to go out there and just play. Last year he gets the courtesy of being the running back for that team. And he knows his role. And we see a much different player. The NFL can be such a tricky thing at running back. A lot of teams rotate their running backs, and it could be one of those things where there may not be a carved out role for him in an offense right away. I want to know that this is a guy that is not going to revert back to that 2018 tape where he looked like he was just lost out on the football field and he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing. That's kind of what gets me. But man, watching that 2019 tape, and seeing him finally kind of arrive as a college football player, especially after some of the trauma he dealt with early in his career at LSU, where I think it was an Xbox, a game player of some sort, I believe. Him and a buddy of his decided to sell one online. They meet up with the guy they're supposed to sell it to. The guy pulls a gun on them. Edwards-Helaire pulls his gun, which was licensed, and he shoots the guy and kills him. And, that is something I think every team probably wanted to dig into. Not necessarily to, why do you have a gun or why this and that, or what were your intentions on that night? Not on that sense. Guys, this is a kid, 19, 20, 21 years old, that just took someone else's life. What kind of trauma has that, what kind of impact has that had on your life? What kind of, trauma has that had on your your psyche, your mental stability? We see it all the time with veterans that come home from going across season war. They come home and they've got PTSD and they're never the same. We're getting ready to, make you an important piece of a 53-man roster, pay you tons of money. We want to make sure that, your mind's right, that we are capable of creating the right environment if there is some lasting effects to that traumatic moment. And I'm sure teams have gotten all the information out of him, because he really is, you listen to the kid talk, you listen to him in the interviews that he did, this is a good kid. This is a guy that's very transparent. I really think, NFL teams got the right picture from him. But once again, hopefully, this is going to be a guy that if there's not a role carved out for him, that he can either be one to carve it out himself, or he can still go about his business until his opportunity comes knocking.
Good stuff. And Edwards-Helaire, again, a polarizing guy, big year last year. All right, looking at the next part of the list, we got players 61 through 70. We have Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver, Arizona State, a guy that could definitely outplay that position. I mean, outplay that 61 spot you gave him. But we'll see. It's hard to say. Jeremy Chin, safety from Southern Illinois, coming in at 62. 63, we have Jalen Johnson, cornerback from Utah. Number 4, we have Damon Arnett, cornerback from Ohio State. Cole Kmet, tight end, number 65, from Notre Dame. 66, we have Wolverine, Josh Uche, outside linebacker. 67, we have Jonah Jackson, guard from Ohio State. Number 68, we have Raekwon Davis, defensive end, defensive line, Alabama. 69, we have Damian Lewis, a guy that I've been a big fan of. LSU coming in at 69, and then at 70, we have Ashton Davis here, safety, California. I'm gonna ask you here. Who's someone in this top 10 who I'm gonna ask two guys here. Who's someone in this top 10 who can overplay their draft stock, and who's someone that could be a major bust?
You mentioned Brandon Ayuk as someone who could outplay that, and I absolutely agree. I think his best football is still ahead of him. I think he's got he's going to get his first real look at an NFL caliber route tree, when he gets to the NFL, and I think he's got the ability to excel in that role. Another guy that could really outplay this is Jalen Johnson, the corner over at Utah. And what I love about him, we talked about AJ Terrell earlier, and how, man, if the confidence is just always on, if he always believes, then this is a guy that can get his hand on a lot of balls. Jalen Johnson may not have all the physical traits of AJ Terrell, but the confidence is always on. This is a guy who's physical at the line. He always believes he can put himself in position to make a play. He does not get overwhelmed by the player from across from him. Jalen Johnson, just a confident kid that makes plays on the ball. I really think he's somebody that could show up and that confidence really carry him to success early in his career in the NFL. A guy with bust potential, Raekwon Davis is a player that, gosh, there's times he's taken over games with his insane size. We're talking about a monstrous player, one of the biggest players in this draft. I wish the technique was a little bit better from him at times. I wish he got the most out of his size at times. This is probably not going to be a player that necessarily does a ton for you in the passing game. But, then again, he could be a guy who could be a starter as a 5-tech in an odd man front. A guy like a Cameron Hayward, or a Calais Campbell in the role he's going to play there in Baltimore, that could really step in and be a starter from day one. So the thing is for him is going to be developing more consistency with his pad level, developing more consistency with his handwork, getting the most out of those long arms and his stature. If he can do that, he could be great. Hasn't been able to do that during his time at Alabama. So he's somebody that's, a team could get him and they could really struggle to really, polish him up.
Yeah. What about a guy coming in at 69, Damian Lewis, a guy along with his teammate Lloyd Cushenberry, who both looked very good at the Senior Bowl. You could take a look at the Senior Bowl early on, and you could see that a big reason that Lewis's team was moving the ball is because of the push that he was creating. Is he a guy that can come in year one, year two, for a team that needs some help on the inside of the offensive line? Can he be a difference maker?
Oh, absolutely. You know, a guy that he kind of reminds me of, former Cowboy and Denver Bronco was Ron Leary, a guy that had a borderline day two grade on him, going into the draft out of Memphis, but didn't end up being drafted because of a degenerative knee that showed up on his medical checks. And teams weren't sure just how long he'd be able to play with the pain in that knee. Obviously he's been in the league for some time. I want to say eight to 10 years is where he's at right now. I want to say closer to 8, but bottom line is he's he coming out, he was a powerful guy, a stocky guy, wide chested, and, a guy that, hey, is he, someone that you want pulling and getting out there in open space and making plays? Not necessarily. But boy, when he fires off and he hits somebody, or when he double teams and gets up to the second level, he's a hard guy to go through and around. That describes Damian Lewis to a T, just like it did Leary. And we saw that in the Senior Bowl. We saw him and Cushenberry work double teams together in practice, and then him get up to a linebacker, and the linebacker's going to try and use his athleticism to get around him. And it's like, dude, he's just so wide. He's broad shoulders, built like a barrel. And you just can't get around him. He's strong, his punch. You certainly can't just try and bull rush him. He's got too much balance. He's got a great center of gravity, a great pad level. He's a guy that could be a very underrated move. And I don't know if he's ever going to have a Pro Bowl caliber year. I don't know if he's ever going to be a Zach Martin or a Quentin, Nelson over with the Indianapolis Colts, that can just do anything you want a guard to do. But boy, you put him in scenarios where he's capable, and Damian Lewis can not only be a starter in this league, he could be a 10 to 12 year starter in this league. So a very, very good build for an interior player, especially, for a team that doesn't want to pull their guards that much, but more interested in maybe pulling centers or pulling, the tackles. I think that's really where Damian Lewis, would fit best.
Yeah. Guy that caught my eye at the Senior Bowl for sure. So we'll move on 71 to 80. 71, we have Cameron Dantzler, cornerback, Mississippi State. 72, we have Jacob Eason. I think he's just a fastball thrower, not really much else outside of that. Quarterback, Washington. We have Rashard Lawrence, defensive tackle, LSU. We have Donovan Peoples-Jones, wide receiver, Michigan at 74. 75, we have Devon Hamilton, defensive tackle, Ohio State. 76, we have Devin Duvernay, wide receiver, Texas. 77, oh man, you're going to have to help me with this one again. Albert Ukuwambam.
Okuibunam.
Oh, wow. Okay. He's a tight end. He's from Missouri. 78, we have Cam Akers, running back, Florida State. 79, we have Van Jefferson, wide receiver, Florida. Guy that I think, that could be, his value could be more than 79 when it's all said and done. And then at number 80, you have Hunter Bryant. So, I feel like every single year, we're seeing at least one running back that gets drafted in a later round that can make an impact. And we also see a wide receiver that can do it as well. You have at 78 and 79 Cam Akers and Van Jefferson. Do you see those guys as those, or do you see maybe other players in this 70 to 80 range that deserve a little more love?
Yeah, well, you got a lot of offensive skill position players in this group. Even Hunter Bryant, who's a tight end, really is kind of more that H-back role, that move tight end role. But yeah, Cam Akers, just a very versatile player. And boy, the contact balance, the center of gravity of him, this is a guy that's not going to make the same kind of moves that a DeAndre Swift is, where he can just make people look silly with the way he cuts. But Akers is just so low that when he cuts, guys are still going to get a piece of him, but his lower body strength is just so impressive that guys, arm tackles aren't going to work. If he can change the amount of contact he's going to take when he changes direction, it's just as good as making somebody miss. So I'm a big fan of Akers, a guy very versatile, a guy that can help in the pass game. I think is tailor made to be able to help in pass protection. I think he could be a guy that helps. Van Jefferson, outstanding route runner. That's the thing to know about him. This is a guy that, if you're trusting him to get separation, you're going to be happy. I'm going to chime in on two others in this group. Devin Duvernay. You want to talk about a guy who could prove me wrong and exceed the value where I've got him at 76. There is a little bit of Tyreek Hill to his game. Now, Tyreek Hill is a one-of-a-kind player. We just don't see very many players with that running back build, with that kind of speed, that are a little bit less polished when it comes to the route running. We really don't see guys like that have a lot of success at wide receiver in the NFL.
And, however, I'll say this, you never know, because coming out, we didn't know Tyreek Hill was going to turn into this kind of route runner. And,
absolutely.
And he's the first guy. I don't remember the last time we've seen a guy with that kind of speed actually really know how to use it, because in so many ways, guys who have, that low 4.3 speed, those guys, they overuse their speed, and it tends to work against them, where he's a guy that really, did figure it out. But anyway.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, a lot of this is fit. And there's a lot of these offensive skill position players we could say this with. Devin Duvernay wasn't necessarily used quite properly at Texas either. Sam Ehlinger doesn't have the best, deep ball accuracy. They didn't send Devin Duvernay deep that often. They played him in a little bit more of a traditional slot route. Very reliable target while he was at Texas. However, for a team that wants to utilize him similar to the way Kansas City uses Tyreek Hill, move him around, find different ways to get him free releases where he can use that deep speed he's got to threaten the deep safety, to spread the field, to expand all that room underneath. Guys, Devin Duvernay can do it. The speed is real, and the play strength is real too. When I say get a free release, moving him around, motioning him to get a free release, it's because, you can really stump a receiver that first few steps off the line by getting into his hip pocket, getting onto his, getting into his space. That way he can't get into his sprint. That way he can't pump those arms. If Devin Duvernay can do that, he's going to run by a ton of people. Now, you're going to have to put him in an offense with a quarterback who's got the arm strength to make the most of it. I hear people in Dallas all the time ask me, Austin, wouldn't it be great if we got Devin Duvernay to put him in the slot? And I say, guys, I don't know if Dak Prescott's got the arm strength to make the most of a Devin Duvernay. I just don't think he does. However, I look at a team like the Denver Broncos with Drew Lock. You put him as a slot receiver in that kind of system, we could really see not only Drew Lock really come into his own, but Devin Duvernay outplay this ranking at 76. His speed and his play strength to be able to run through the contact down the field and continue to separate is very, very good. And like I say, Tyreek Hill's kind of, is a rare breed. Duvernay has a similar skill set. And if a team can put him in that kind of role with a quarterback with very, very good arm strength, I look at another team like Buffalo, another team that could, use a guy like this. They've got guys similar to this. I don't know if they've got someone quite that fits it as good as Duvernay does. Those could be some teams that could really use him. Real quick, I'll touch on Albert Okudah as well. Never got utilized in the proper way at Missouri. They played him in line. They flexed him out. The offense was constantly shifting there. They were constantly changing things they needed him to be able to contribute. I'll tell you right now, Albert Okudah is probably the best mover, the best athlete of the tight ends in this. And we've got some good move tight ends when you talk about Hunter Bryant, when you talk about Bryson Hopkins, when you talk about Harrison Bryant. We've got some good ones in this group. Albert Okudah, as big as he is and the way he moves, could be could honestly, we could come out of this, and everybody likes to do their redrafts 5 years down the line. He could be in a top in a first round of a redraft 5 years down the line. I think teams are scared of what they don't know with him because we have not gotten to see him consistently do the things that you want a tight end to do because of the constant change of the offensive system there at Missouri. So, we will certainly see when it comes to Okudah. He's a sleeper in this draft. But I tell you what, man, he's going to get into training camp, and guys are going to be playing going through one-on-one drills with him, trying to cover him. And there's going to be guys coming back saying, "Geez, this guy can move. This guy can cut. This guy he can separate. He can make plays, 50-50 balls." There are going to be guys coming away from that. Can an offensive coordinator put him in that position? We'll see. But I'm a big fan of Okudah, an even bigger fan of Devin Duvernay. I know where the guy trains. I know where the guy grew up, not far from me. He's an outstanding young man, and I'm looking forward to seeing what those guys can do, provided they're put in the right roles.
Absolutely. And, when you look at the draft historically, when you look at the all-time great receivers, Shannon Sharp, Antonio Gates, I think even Jason Witten. Remember when where was Jason Witten drafted? He was drafted late, wasn't he?
No, he was a little bit higher. I want to say a second round pick out of a late second round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Dallas got him out of Tennessee.
But okay, I think guys like Shannon, Antonio Gates, and I know there's other ones too. But when we look at these tight ends, and you look at draft steals in the NFL draft, I think there's two positions where you see them a lot offensively: running backs and also tight ends. And that is that's a position where typically you see it. And I think when you look at some of the all-time greats, a number of these guys were overlooked in the NFL draft. We're gonna look at players 80 through 90, or I'm saying 81 through 90. So we have Ben Bredesen, guard from Michigan. We have another very polarizing pick at 82. I mean, it's a quarterback. It's Jake Fromm, the quarterback from Georgia. At 83, we have guard John Simpson from Clemson. 84, we have Akeem Davis Gaither, outside linebacker, Appalachian State. 85, we have Bryson Hopkins, tight end, Purdue. 86, we have Zach Moss from Utah. 87, another obviously maybe the most polarizing prospect in this draft because he's a Heisman candidate. A guy that came close to. I mean, no one really came close to beating Joe Burrow, but in retrospect, he was a top guy. Jalen Hurts, 87, quarterback from Oklahoma. 88, we have Tyler Johnson, wide receiver from Minnesota. 89, we have Robert Hunt, the guard from Louisiana Lafayette. And then at 90, we have Julian Okwara, defensive end, outside linebacker, Notre Dame. This to me, when we evaluate this, Austin, and we look at, we're doing this 10 picks at a time, there's a lot of juicy guys to talk about here. Julian Okwara, that's someone who, that's someone who I think could potentially, outweigh, could be better than where he's drafted there. You have Jalen Hurts there. You have the other quarterback there, Jake Fromm. When you look at this list, there's just so much to talk about. But what comes to mind here, when you look at these prospects, because you got some polarizing guys, and you have some guys that could potentially be worth more than where they're worth a higher pick than where they're drafted.
Yeah, if you start with the quarterbacks, Jake Fromm, plays this game with such a terrific football IQ. Are the physical skills impressive? Is the arm strength impressive? the velocity he puts on the ball. No, it's not. Is this a guy that's going to do his best work on the move, which is becoming more and more of a requisite for NFL quarterbacks? I don't know if I'm comfortable saying that either. But he just plays the game with such a good mental IQ. There's some Kirk Cousins in this. Although I do tend to think that Fromm could be a little bit better, of a pre-snap quarterback than Kirk Cousins. But people got to realize Kirk Cousins is not a dummy. Does he go through stints where it seems like he doesn't do well under pressure? Sure. Does it seem like he's always playing the game with a high level of IQ? Not always. Fromm could be that. However, we do see instances this last year where he didn't have the same amount of talent around him as he did his first 2 years. And all of a sudden there was, mistakes, there was forcing things, and we saw him, we saw the competitor in him get the better of the academic, the scholar in him, the bus driver, the decision maker in him. On the other hand, Jalen Hurts, one of the funnest players in this draft to evaluate for me for a variety of reasons. First of all, he's an outstanding teammate, an outstanding leader. This is a guy who could be the face of your franchise, similar to a Dak Prescott, even if he's not the most gifted passer. A lot of development that's, and the truth be told, Jalen Hurts may never be a terrific passer. This may be a guy, you bring him in as a project, as a backup quarterback that you hope to develop, and it may never pan out for you. You're still going to have a heck of a person. You're still going to have a heck of a teammate, a heck of a leader, and more importantly, he's got that safety net of being able to help. Taysom Hill and what he has done in New Orleans is opening up a lot of people's eyes and saying, man, for some of these guys who are still developing as passers, they could possibly help you in a different role while still developing as a quarterback. I'm not suggesting taking Jalen Hurts and saying, hey, bud, no need for you to pick up that quarterback playbook. We're going to move you to a different position. No. But in the same sense, hey, bud, while you're developing behind a proven starter, let's see how we can't get you involved. We want to get you involved. Your teammates are going to want you involved based on, the way he carries himself, the way he leads, whether it's as a verbal leader like a quarterback needs to be, or as by example, the way a backup quarterback would have to do. Jalen Hurts has an opportunity to impact a football team right away in one form or another. That's, for everybody who says, oh, he's a quarterback, I don't disagree with you one bit. But I'm saying his initial impact doesn't have to be that. It can be in a Taysom Hill role where you get him out there, you run the football with him a little bit, maybe you throw him a couple of quick ones just to get him the football and get him moving. All the meanwhile, those plays don't take that long to work on in practice. He's still going about developing as a quarterback. I think Jalen Hurts has that kind of safety net. I think it's going to put him on a lot of teams' draft boards. The person he is, the competitor he is, the leader he is. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see what comes of Jalen Hurts in the NFL. Now, those guys, obviously, that we're getting into, are they day 2 picks? Maybe do they slide into day 3? Who knows? Putting them in the right situation with the right offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, the right staff in place is going to be very, very important.
Yeah, and, the interesting thing with these quarterbacks is they say the most important thing about a quarterback, first and foremost, is his mind. And when you look at Jake Fromm, and you look at him as a quarterback, you look at Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. In terms of their mental makeup, these are guys. I think that when you look at them, you think franchise quarterback. The concern is that are these guys that can consistently drive the ball downfield, that really can be an offense, that they can be an offense you can build around. But I think the concern is that you're concerned about what the upside really is, and that this is a quarterback that you're going to have to develop a system where you're going to need your defense to play really well, and you're going to have to really build around him. And I think because of that, despite the fact that these guys have the mental makeup to be great, great NFL quarterbacks from a leadership standpoint, arm strength, it's still a pretty big deal. And if that's not your strong suit, it's hard to get drafted high, in today's NFL draft. So
absolutely, I'll say this much, guys, and it's funny because you listen to what Justin Herbert's teammates and coaches all say about him as a leader. Even listen to some of the things we heard out of Mobile. Guys, stand up for this guy. However, you give me Jalen Hurts or Jake Fromm from the neck up, and give me Justin Herbert's abilities as a passer, as an athlete, all everything from the neck down, Justin Herbert, but from the neck up, give me Fromm or Jalen Hurts. We are talking about a guy who is a guarantee to go in the top 5. We're talking about a guy, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It doesn't matter if Tua goes 3. It doesn't matter if Tua goes 4. The Chargers aren't going to be smart to sit at 6 and wait for him. The Miami Dolphins wouldn't be smart to sit at 5 and wait for him. You would have a third true top 10 value quarterback, where I've got Herbert ranked, in the teens and not necessarily being a top 10 value. I've got him going in the top 5, 6 picks, but he's not a top 10 value. You give him what Jalen Hurts or what Jake Fromm have from the neck up, no doubt about it in my mind, he's a top 10 value.
For sure. Okay, we're gonna go through the last of these here. So we have 91, Colin Johnson, who I got to watch a few plays of last week, but just not much though. Wide receiver from Texas coming in at 91. Isaiah Wilson, the offensive tackle from Georgia. I think if this guy does not make it as an offensive lineman in the NFL, this is a guy that is just an enormous human being. I don't know if any of you are WWE wrestling fans or know who a guy named Braun Strowman is, but this guy looks about the same size as Braun Strowman, and I just think they'd be a phenomenal tag team.
Future candidate for your most savage player in the year shows we've been doing.
Oh yeah, he is enormous. Like I was watching the combine with a snack, and I was jumped out of my freaking seat. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I thought yeah. But anyway, so I'm like, yeah, they got some big boys there at Georgia on that offensive line. All right, 93, Harrison Bryant, tight end, Florida Atlantic. 94, Jordan Elliott, defensive tackle, Missouri. Number 95, Adam Troutman, tight end, Dayton. Number 96, Matt Hennessy, center at Temple, was on display at the Combine. Lucas Niang, did I say that correctly? Offensive tackle, TCU.
Niang.
Very good. Chase Claypool. He should be here somewhere. Wide receiver, number 98. Coming in at number 98, the wide receiver from Notre Dame. And number 99, we have Malik Harrison, linebacker, Ohio State. And at number 100, we have Prince Tega. I'll let you do this one, Austin.
Wanago.
Yeah. You know what? I always say that every single year, I'm saying this year that I need to start looking at, my draft prospects earlier. And this is one of the reasons why. You need an entire course just to learn the pronunciation of a lot of these prospects' names. So,
and I'm not going to promise you that I'm 100% pronouncing all these. I've looked into the pronunciation of all of them. Some of them I'm still maybe pronouncing a little bit off. There's some of them like Owegbunam and Igbenogany that I knew, or Okuibunam, I beg your pardon, and Igbenogany that I know for a fact that's how it's pronounced. But there's some of these others, you get the pronunciations of them. They don't always have the little speaker where you can tap on it and they actually say it. So I'm doing my best with them just as much as you are. Lucky for me, I've at least seen how you sounded out based on their bios. So
Yeah. Well, we got this list here. These last 10 players. Um, who's a guy that could really outplay where he's drafted here.
Adam Troutman. It's funny. I believe I'm pretty sure he's the sixth ranked tight end on my board, which is funny because my top six tight ends are ranked between 65 and 95. 30 players there, and six of them are tight ends. Any one of them could be the first drafted for a variety of different reasons, depending on what a team needs. However, I will say this: what makes Troutman special to me, this is a guy that absolutely makes the most of his imposing size. And man, there were times I wish those Senior Bowl practices would have been live, because this was a guy you could just tell the way he turned up field and got his eyes up looking for, okay, where's that first defender coming from? There was an itch about him that you could just tell he's wanting to lower that shoulder. No, no, no. It's practice. I know they're not going to hit me. He played at Dayton. He played against a much smaller, a much, less stature brand of talent, down there. But I'll say this much. He was a man amongst boys at that level. It appears that's not just an aspect that comes out when he's playing against lesser competition. I really think it's a mindset. I think this guy's got a little George Kittle in him where he turns up field and it's not just about gaining yards. It's about finishing the play right. And that's putting it in a defender's head that, bud, when you better tiptoe when you're coming after me. Don't you come downhill on me and think you're going to blow me up, because I'm going to set you straight the first and only time you give that an opportunity. That seems to be the attitude Adam Troutman plays with. And he's a big boy. He's an imposing player. So I could really see this guy being the standout tight end of this bunch when it's all said and done. Now, that being said, that going from Dayton to the NFL is a big jump. He's a lot of times they just lined him up and they just threw him the ball down the field. There wasn't a ton of route running. There wasn't a ton of having to really push hard to get separation. There's still a lot to this game that he's got to learn about playing the tight end position, but give him a good coach. Give him an offense that's going to utilize him, going to get the ball in his hands, going to throw him the ball over the middle and trust him over the middle. Get it into his hands early and let him run with it. I think that we could have ourselves a heck of a football player in Adam Troutman.
And, it sounds like that, with the direction we're going in, that, they always do these NFL redrafts, that in a few years from now, it sounds like a couple of these tight ends that you think that teams are going to be looking back and saying to themselves, we should have gotten a guy like Adam Troutman higher. The other guy, geez, I don't even want to try to pronounce his name again. We could have
Albert Okudah.
Oh yeah, there we go. It'll take a few times. These are guys, and again, I said it before. You look at some of the best tight ends of all time statistically. A lot of these guys got drafted late here. So I'm gonna ask you this. Every single year, if you go back historically, Austin, and everyone who's listening, if you look over time, go back every single year. Now, obviously, the last few years, you can't really tell because these guys have only been playing for so long. But if you really go and trace it back, pretty much every single year in the first round of the NFL draft, there's at least typically one guy that eventually gets a gold jacket. When you think of, last question here, when you think of gold jacket guys in the first round, who are a few guys that come to mind there, and we'll end with that.
You know what? I'm going to start with Auburn tackle Derrick Brown. This is a guy that just everything you want in a defensive tackle, the size, the ability, the explosion off the line, the handwork, everything on the field is what you could want in a defensive tackle. And I honestly think, he's got the versatility to play in a two gap scheme or to be a nose in a one gap penetrating scheme as well, where you typically want a little bit more undersized players. But that's the thing. What he brings to the table, and I talked a little bit about this with Kenneth Murray and a few other guys earlier, and Jalen Hurts. When you talk about a Hall of Fame player, they're not just a guy that goes out and does it on the field. They do it in the locker room. They do it in the community. Across the board, they are everything a franchise could have wanted with that pick. I think Derrick Brown's going to be that. I think this is a guy that, he is going to, early in his career, he's going to be involved in his community. He's going to be a leader on that defense. He's going to be a player that more veteran players look to, to see the way he carries himself, the way he goes about his business. I think he's going to have a lot of success early in his career. I think Derrick Brown, has that kind of potential. Another player I think has, future Hall of Famer written all over him. Jeffrey Okudah, he is just an exceptionally gifted athlete. And when you combine that with his feel for the game, his instincts for the game, I think it's really going to make Jeffrey Okudah a special cover corner in the NFL. This is a guy who has got the instincts and the reaction time to play in zone. This is a guy who's got the hips and he's got the size to play in man. I mean, guys, if you go back to the combine and you watch him flip his hips in some of those drills and you watch his feet and how they are synced up to his hips, he looks like he is just gliding above the ground. I mean, he's just an exceptional athlete at the position. There's no other way I can describe it than that. And I really think he's got it in him to be a Jalen Ramsey type, where he comes into the league and right away he is one of the better cornerbacks this league has seen. He's another guy I think really fits in to that mold as a guy that, yes, could be getting a gold jacket one day. And the third guy, I'm going to go with somebody I think you were kind of wanting me to say. I think you were pushing me to say this guy, even though you never told me. And it's because he's just special. We haven't seen a lot like him. And the ones we have not been as good as him. Isaiah Simmons. Guys, you know what? For all you guys that want to listen to the draft hit, the media scouts out there that say Isaiah Simmons doesn't even have a position. No, the NFL hasn't come up with a position yet. They're going to come up with a position for Isaiah Simmons. There's no doubt about it. This guy can affect the passing game in any way, shape, form you need of a linebacker or defensive back. The NFL will find a place for Isaiah Simmons. Better yet, he will kick the door open and he'll make his own role. We will be talking about, I personally think we will be talking about him the way we talk about a Tyreek Hill, where you say, guys, we just haven't seen that work. It's an unconventional skill set and build to play one specific position. Is he a running back? Is he a slot receiver? Can he play on the perimeter? He's not big enough. He's not going to out jump anybody. The guy has no idea how to run routes. And yet he's the most dangerous, probably the most dangerous player in football right now when you talk about just how quickly he can change the game.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons. Guys, one of the things I think Isaiah Simmons brings to the table that I still can't believe not more people are hitting on. Guys, the NFL right now, NFL defensive coordinators have no idea how to cover a tight end. Who do we put on him? Do we put a safety? Do we put a cover corner and let him get bullied? Do we put a linebacker out there and let this guy separate from him? How do we cover Travis Kelce? How we could never figure out how to cover Rob Gronkowski. How do we cover a George Kittle? How do we cover some of the better H-backs in this league? How do we do it? We have no idea. Cam Chancellor, okay. People put that name out there. There have been some safeties that have had some success at it. Guys, Isaiah Simmons is built to say, hey, that's Zach Ertz. Go cover him. That's Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce. We're going to lock you up on him one-on-one, and it's not going to take our best cover corner to do it. It's not going to take a safety to do it. We're not going to be a liability covering those star tight ends. Same thing goes for the running backs. Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, Isaiah Simmons can do it. You want to disguise? Go ahead.
And it's going to be all about. And this is why I think the New York Giants are a good fit, is because he needs. Look, he can be successful anywhere, but he needs to go to a team where they know how to utilize personnel. Joe Judge was a special teams coach, and the way he utilized personnel, it's something that they raved about, and I think it's really a core philosophy of how they want to build there. So I think a good value for him, really is right there around pick number 4. But I agree. This is a guy that has that kind of gold jacket potential.
Hey, another thing that I don't hear enough people comment on when we talk about Isaiah Simmons. Do you want to disguise a coverage? What happens when your will linebacker, maybe he's your Mike in certain nickel packages, is your deep safety? Guys, you can do he can come after the quarterback. Go watch the national championship and watch how impactful he was those first few drives against LSU, rushing the passer, in coverage, stopping the run. Guys, this is a guy that, like I say, we haven't seen it before. If I could compare it remotely to somebody, in my opinion, I might throw out a guy like maybe Shaq Thompson at Carolina, like Dion Buchanan, who was a very good player for the Arizona Cardinals for some time. The difference is this is an A-plus version of those guys.
Yeah, athletically, a much better version. He ran a 4.39, at the combine in his 40. And look, this is a guy that, you can stick with your base package, and you can still be very comfortable on a variety of different passing downs, because he really can do whatever is asked of him. And that's a huge value in terms of, winning schematically, in today's NFL. Do we have any other gold jacket guys outside of these that come to mind?
I mean, those three are obviously the three that really come to mind for me. Obviously, Chase Young's the best player in this draft. However, Chase Young's going to walk into this league, and no difference than Myles Garrett, no different than Nick Bosa, no different than Jadeveon Clowney. He is instantly going to be the focus of pass protections, of double teams, things like that. The offensive coordinators aren't going to wait and see if he lives up to the billing.
Yeah, he's on the wall.
Yes, he's instantly going to be treated like the best, the most dangerous pass rusher on the field. Things like that can they can hinder your production. Guys, Jadeveon Clowney, there are folks in Houston that just buy by him being one of the most overrated, being a complete draft bust. Guys, there are games Jadeveon Clowney takes over. He's getting so much pressure. Is he finishing plays? Not necessarily. He's beating double teams, though. He's demanding a ton of attention. Production can vary based on expectations. As far as guys like Okudah and Simmons and Brown, these are guys that, the production's not going to be, Jeffrey Okudah could have an interception or two a year. When you look at how many times teams tested him, that's going to be the selling factor. Well, nobody ever threw his way because they were scared of that side of the field. Isaiah Simmons is going to be everywhere on the field. You can't avoid him. Derrick Brown is right smack dab in the middle of the field. You can't avoid him. He's going to be involved in the players some way or another. Those are guys I just don't I don't see missing on. Those are my golden jacket guys. If I had to go out on a limb for somebody, I'm going to go with, you know what? I'm going to go with my gut on this. I'm going to say Tua Tagovailoa stays healthy. And I'm going to say that Tua really has a special career, because if he stays healthy, guys, he's going to quickly turn a passing game around. And if an offense builds around him, adds receivers, adds the protection, gives him the right kind of running back. You know, it's funny. My latest mock draft, the 3 players I had Miami taking in the first round: Tua Tagovailoa, your franchise quarterback; Josh Jones, a guy with the upside to be a franchise left tackle with a little bit more development; and DeAndre Swift, the most versatile running back in this class, in my opinion, and a guy that can really, be a Christian McCaffrey type when it's like, hey, if you want to run him 20, 25 times, he can get you 100, 125 yards. If you want to throw him the ball 10 times, he can go get you 100 yards receiving and put 2 scores on the board. Any way you want to use him is great. That's you put a guy like that with Tua Tagovailoa, it just makes him that much more dangerous. I think Tua can be it. You know, you throw Joe Burrow in that conversation too, just because I think Joe Burrow has we talked about how smart Jake Fromm and Jalen Hurts are. I think Joe Burrow's ability pre-snap to really give himself an advantage going into the play is really, really special. I think this is a guy, he's going to need players around him. I'll tell you right now, his 2018 tape was nowhere near the same as his 2019 tape. You saw some of the same things, but you also saw a guy that dropped his eyes early because he didn't always trust the people in front of him in pass protection. He took off prematurely a lot of times simply because, he didn't trust the scheme he was in. He didn't trust the protection. Didn't always trust the receivers either. This is a guy, the big difference between Burrow's 18 and 19 was confidence. You've got to put players around him that can make him confident. In Cincinnati, where he's most likely going to end up, unless somebody over there's lost their minds.
He was. You look at those 2 tapes. You even see his body language. You can see he feels in control. And you know what? Kudos to him, because you know what? I don't think we've ever seen a college quarterback learn an offense as well as he learned that offense. Man, could you imagine if Carolina were to move up and
I tell you what, that would capture the headlines. I mean, the Carolina Panthers would be, the center of attention throughout the off-season programs, and going into the season, they'd be one headline that would absolutely go, that would go. It'd constantly be at the forefront of the media attention. I'll say this much though: it's never been about Joe Burrow's confidence in himself. It's often been about the confidence in the players around him. And Cincinnati, hey, they've got Joe Mixon, got A.J. Green, got Boyd. They've got a nice group of pass catchers there. Jonah Williams is going to be stepping into that left tackle role. That offensive line still needs help. I've got them doing that with their first pick in the second round, adding an interior guy in Netani Muti. But Zach Taylor and that coaching staff, they are going to have to develop an offense around him, and more importantly, they've got to continue to put pieces around him. That may mean neglecting the defense a little bit in this year's draft or in future off seasons. But if you want Joe Burrow to live up to what he's going to do, you've got to make him confident in the players around him. That was the difference between 2018 and 2019.
They got a great running back. Let's not forget that.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So that's going to wrap up everything for this episode here. Thank you for joining us here on Pigskin Nut Podcast, also on Pigskin Nut on YouTube. For Steve the Scout, the CEO of Pigskin Nut, Austin Smith, our lead draft analyst, signing off.